Welcome to the Listen for Life podcast with Genevieve Richardson. Genevieve is a speech-language pathologist rehabilitating adults with communication challenges after a stroke or due to a neurological impairment. Get equipped with knowledge from experts in the field and professionals you need to know. We'll hear stories and experiences from others who are navigating life with aphasia. So, put your earphones in and take a walk outside. This isn't just a podcast. This is a community, a resource, and a support system. We're in this together. Do life.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Genevieve Richardson. I'm the owner of Pathology and located in Kansas. And today on the show, we are talking to Kim and Mike Barnes. They are the co-founders of Parenting Parents. They have a website, a Facebook page, and the reason we're talking to them today is to discuss support and resources, whether you're a stroke survivor, a family member caring for a stroke survivor, if your loved one has dementia, and or you are an adult child caring for one of your parents or another family member, and you don't know where to start. So we will welcome Kim and Mike here in just a second, and we will hear their story and give you guys some good takeaways and resources that you can depend on. What's really exciting is that they are reaching folks across the 50 states, maybe even internationally, but they've got, last I looked, more than 5,000 folks on your website. So let's welcome Kim and Mike, and let's go here. Thank you so much for coming in today.
We are so glad to be with you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
You guys are great. So I have to say, I'm trying to rise to the challenge. They were professional TV personalities, and I'm just practicing, but you guys are gracious, and thank you for your time.
You're sweet. Thank you.
Tell us how you got into parenting aging parents. How did that evolve?
We were definitely not sitting around going, we don't
Right.
have
I'm on project.
Yes. This really came from our own experiences.
Yeah, I kind of get the blame or the credit depending on how you want to look at it. My mom has Alzheimer's, and as you know, Alzheimer's is not an overnight type of disease. And she started showing signs of it, and my sister and I talked to my dad about y'all should move out of the house and move into independent living. And we went through that whole process. And after they went to independent living, they were there for a couple of years, and mom's Alzheimer's was getting worse. And it was not only hard on her, it was hard on my dad, taking care of her 24/7, even though they had meals served to them, going down to the cafeteria. It was still tough on him. So we talked to him again, said, Mom really needs to move to memory care. Now, not today, not tomorrow, but pretty soon, just because it's going to send her to an early grave and you to an early grave if you keep trying to take care of her. And he was very nice about it and said, I trust you. Y'all are in charge.
So no way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which I think that was from an emotional perspective,
yeah,
right? Like he couldn't bear the fact of I'm going to separate us.
Yeah.
So, but he knew that
it still took a year and a half for the whole process to go through.
That's another story.
Yeah, that's a whole other story. But my sister and I went and looked at 4 memory care places that were very close to the independent living place where they live up in the Dallas area. And I went in with the attitude like, this is going to be easy. It's like looking for an apartment in my 20s. And let's make sure the closet is good enough because mom likes closets and, that type of thing for clothes. And I got in there and I was so overwhelmed because I didn't know what questions to ask. They started throwing all these acronyms out at me. I'm like, whoa, what is this? I came home and told Kim, we need to start something to help people because I felt prepared and I was overwhelmed. So most people would really feel overwhelmed.
So that's kind of where that was planted the seed, I think. And then it took a little while. We were frankly pretty busy with our on-camera business during COVID. That was during COVID. And so we were pretty busy with that. And, there was a part of me too, that at the time that I thought, oh gosh, that sounds kind of depressing to talk about some of those really, really hard things. And as it progressed over that next year, really, while they were the discussions of, okay, it's almost time, wait, now let's wait a little bit longer for Mike's mom. During that same process, that whole time frame, I was stepping in and helping my mom more who is single. So there's different challenges with that. She also lives in a different city than I do. She lives in Houston. And so there were those things that I was starting to step in and notice. Also, though, noticing with my friends that there was one of my good friends whose mom had brain surgery, another one whose mom was diagnosed with Parkinson's. And I didn't know about it because we don't talk about it. We don't think to
Oh,
call a
true.
friend and say, oh, hey, by the way, how are your kids? How's work? Blah, blah, blah. And oh, by the way, mom has fill in the blank. And so what I started noticing is that it becomes very isolating because you feel like, oh, other people won't understand. They're probably not going through this. I don't want to burden this with them.
Well, you don't want
because,
to talk about depressing things.
right. It's normally not great news.
Yeah.
Different than when we have children and we're, wanting to share exciting things. And even when there are struggles with our kids, we can feel like things are going to get better. We're going to get through the terrible twos. We're going to get through the teenage years. We're going to get through these stages because generally it levels out, it gets better. Where unfortunately with this other stage, it's not always great news that gets better. And so long story short is that, when they finally moved Mike's mom to memory care, Mike posted something on social media just to say, wow, this is really a hard day. And what I really noticed from, of course, the empathy that was expressed, what I really picked up on were the number of people who said, I am right there with you. I've already done that, or I see it coming in my future. And I turned to him and I said, you're right, which I don't say very often. But
she did that.
Yeah, I did. I said, you're right. We should do something. And so that's where we just thought, okay, let's just kind of as an experiment, create this Facebook group and just see
what it does.
Are other people interested in talking about it and being part of that conversation?
So this month is 2 years.
Yes.
It's hard to believe.
Yeah, I was just on your Facebook page and I'm like, oh, April. Well, it's perfect. A whole 2 years in.
Yes.
What would you say are some of the lessons you've learned running this Facebook group for 2 years?
Yeah, for me personally, I went into it with the attitude of, because I have Kim to bounce ideas off, to bounce emotional things off, and to talk about different things that we've gone through with our moms and even with my dad, because my dad had to have a pacemaker, he had COVID and was in the hospital, stuff like that, just the normal stuff. But I have Kim to bounce that off of. But so I went into it thinking, people need information. I need information. I don't know the difference that well about Medicare and Medicaid. I don't know all the different things about the legal stuff and making sure we have everything tied down. I don't know all that. So I want that information. So I thought, because Kim and I have such an experience doing interviews from our TV life, that, okay, we'll do all these informational interviews with experts to give you the information that you need. So I really thought that was going to be the added plus that we could share. But found out what Kim figured out really quickly also was that people just felt so alone. And so one of the quick comments that we had was, I'm so glad we have this group to go to because I felt so alone. I'm like, wow. Yeah, I didn't realize it as much because I don't talk to my friends that much about the troubles with my mom, but I talk to Kim all the time. So I don't feel alone in that respect. But so many people keep it bottled up and don't have anyone to share it with, don't have anyone to ask for help with. And that's what we're able to offer.
Because even when you have a very supportive spouse, they don't necessarily know the answers. They can listen and be a great ear, but they don't necessarily have experience with different issues that you're going through. And that's one of the things that we've noticed is that when I feel so strongly about the fact that if we talk about this subject, as hard as it can be, we can help each other. We can I have a little tidbit because I've had to go through my mom being scammed. If I can share one little tidbit that I learned from that might help somebody else, that makes you feel so good. And, Mike has great experiences from, as his mom has progressed with Alzheimer's and doesn't recognize him anymore. And how does he handle that? So with that collective wisdom is so powerful and so valuable. And I don't think people realize that they often have, again, just by sharing a funny story that your mom said something quirky. There was something the other day that was just hilarious. And that just brings a little bit of levity and it brings a little bit of a realness so that you don't feel I'm just in my own little world trying to figure out all these things by myself. I think the other thing that I've really noticed is the importance of preparation.
Mm.
and having conversations before they're necessary, even when they're really hard. And sometimes our parents don't want to talk about these subjects.
For sure.
And that's one of the things that I've seen that has been probably one of the things that causes the most stress for families, and especially for adult children, is parents that don't want to share, don't want to talk about things, and don't want help. And that's so hard because nobody wants to give up their independence.
Right.
So it's knowing, how do you balance that and how do you approach that from the adult child's perspective to offer that help, because we want to do what's best for our parents and what's best by our parents. But sometimes you have to push a little bit, which is hard.
So much to unpack there, because this is these are the conversations we need to have. And so let's see. So let's start with some of the legal stuff. I mean, we don't have to get into the weeds on this, but in general, one thing I've been trying to share with my community is we need to have these conversations about durable power of attorney, medical power of attorney. What are your wishes?
Mhm.
A will is not necessarily enough.
That's right.
You need a trust. We both interviewed the same law firm here in Austin.
Yeah,
And
they're
I
great.
learned so much because we're going through many of these things actively right now with my mother-in-law.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so taking what I was hearing as a professional
Mhm.
and then applying it personally, that is a whole other
Yes. Yes.
that is a whole other bag. And it's like, wait a minute, now I've got to find what document? Like,
Right.
do we
Right.
have it? Do you have originals
Mhm.
of some of these things? You may have a durable power or a statutory power of attorney in place, but if you don't have an original,
Mhm.
you got to do it again.
Well, and the challenge, I think, with especially with the legal stuff, is that by the time you need it, it might be too late.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? When you need to implement
Yes,
that power of attorney, if your parent is not of sound mind anymore and can't
that's right.
sign off on that,
Yeah.
you can't get one, and
Well,
then you have to go through guardianship and blah blah. It's just
Oh my, yeah,
oh
there are so many other things you can catch up on, but legal stuff, again, like Kim said,
yeah,
if you need it, it's too late.
yeah.
And my dad, even my dad kind of joked about it in a nice way. It makes him feel better. He's been going to an Alzheimer's support group at a church near where he lives once a month. And he went to the one this month, and he came back and he calls me and he says, "Son, I felt so good going to that support group." I said, "Great, Dad." I said, "Yeah." They were talking about legal stuff, and they said, "Do you have a power of attorney? Who here has a power of attorney?" There were about 20 people there. And he said, "Only about half the people raised their hand." I couldn't believe it. I was like, "Good, Dad, you're set. There you go. I'm glad you feel better."
Mhm.
And he's advocating, right? He's like, he's leading by example.
Exactly.
And man, it's just great. And like, I talk to my friends now, ones that I haven't talked to in a while. And I'm like, hey, by the way, do you have all this set up for your folks? Do you know where their trust is? Do you have blah? And we're starting the conversation,
Yeah.
and I try and encourage them to share that with their other friends.
Mhm.
Just put the bug in their ear so that they can start easing into that conversation.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, one thing that I think that might be one of the great positives, I think, by us having these conversations and us being more open about these kinds of things, is that I do think that while we need to make sure our parents have all this in place, I think it's going to make our generation do better about having these things in place for our children at a much earlier age.
Mhm.
Just
So true.
sort of silly story, but when we started doing all of this and interviewing attorneys and learning more about powers of attorney and all of that, we looked at each other and said, "Huh, interesting." We did a will when our son was born, and it was the old floppy disk printout thing, and
Wait, you're not dating yourself,
yeah,
are you?
dates us. If anybody
It
knows, what a
worked,
flop-
though.
It worked.
Yes, it did.
But we realized that we had never updated it when our daughter was born, and she's now in her 20s at the time, and she's still in her 20s. So we realized,
Whoa.
she's not actually in the will. We
Whoops.
should probably do something about that. But we didn't have powers of attorney
No,
then.
we didn't.
And so we that made us think, oh my gosh, as important as it is for us to have these for our parents, we need to have these for ourselves. So we went and got all of the will package, if you will, that we needed for us, and also had our kids in their 20s do it as well, because I think that while a lot of families will get a medical power of attorney for their kids when they go off to college, which is such a great thing, which is so important to do. That was the only thing we had. We didn't have a durable power of attorney. We didn't have all of the other things. And so, and while, our daughter doesn't necessarily need a will at this moment, our son who owns a house does, but it's just, I think that we'll hopefully be better prepared as we get older, maybe.
The problem is that there are so many things, so many details to take care of. And it's not like you have to do them all at once in one day. But there's so many things. And I learned that from an early age from my dad, because when I was in junior high school, I guess I was in 8th grade, my grandfather had a stroke, my dad's dad. And it kind of changed things for us because my dad took more care of him, I guess you could say, to where as opposed to just visiting him every once in a while, because he lived in Dallas where we did. We saw him quite a bit, to where my dad would go see him after work one night a week, every weekend just about. We'd go drive up, pick up my granddad up, bring him back to our house, and he'd have lunch or dinner with us either Saturday or Sunday. So we were more active with him, but I still remember, my dad still laughs about it to this day. He did not know at the time, because my granddad was 85 or so when this happened. My dad didn't realize that because he was a World War I veteran, that he could have gotten VA benefits for years and years and years and never had. And finally, because when he went into the hospital because of the stroke and went through rehab, my dad found out about it and was able to get his VA stuff taken care of. And he had last, 5 years of his life. He had that to help him out a little bit. But my dad hadn't thought about that. My dad had taken care of other things because of what my dad did with his job. He was very proactive about wills and powers of attorney and stuff like that. But it's still easy to forget other things. So knowing that, even for someone who was very prepared like my dad, and someone who's very prepared like Kim and I had been, but we still forgot about our daughter, and my dad didn't realize about my grandfather's VA benefits. It's so easy to overlook these things because we're in the weeds about it. We're like, oh my gosh, we can't see everything because we're so busy with it. So being able to take a step back, and maybe even getting some help from someone who can take a step back and look and say, oh, have you thought about this? Or did you take care of that?
That's where I think your community is so amazing, because you all actively talk through that. And you have the resource, the book that you can buy. I actually have it here, so I was going to pop it up on the screen. Let's see if I can.
Oh, thank you.
Let's see if I can do it. That's the next thing. Oh, now you get to see me big. Oh, there we go. That's what I was trying to do.
Yes.
The Caregiver's Key. Can you tell us a little bit about this resource and how it benefits families?
This came out of really my need because Mike's dad still manages all of their stuff, if you will, but I'm doing more of that for my mom with doctor's appointments, and have the doctor asking me, has she had a pneumonia vaccine, has she had a shingle shot, what's her blood type, all of those questions that she may not, blood type she knows, but like this, some of her records and things like that. When did you have this procedure done or whatever? She may not remember all of that. So this really was kind of we developed because I have this file folder with all these like
right, and it's probably
sticky notes, all of that. And so we thought, what if we could put all of that information in one place where it lists, where you can keep all that really important information from. Do they have VA benefits? And it can prompt questions. Who is your financial planner? Do you have online accounts for your phone bill? Do you pay? What bills do you pay online? What vaccines have you had? What medications?
Who mows your yard? Is there an alarm code in your house? Anything like that.
So
all kinds of stuff to where if something happens to mom or dad and where they're in the hospital and you can't talk to them because they're out of it for whatever reason. This has all the answers for you because it's all these things where, if you don't know these things, like how do you pay your electric bill? Do you get it by mail or do you get it on email? How do you get into your email? Things like that to where if you have to do things, you're stuck if you don't have the answers.
So we tried to just make it sort of really a workbook because you have to do the work. You have to fill it out.
You have to fill it out.
But we give all the prompts for the things that you might not have thought of. And even the things you've thought of, just a safe place. Where actually is the will located if you needed it?
So true.
Those things. And it goes on to even, last wishes and the what kind of where's the deed to where's the title to the car, what are the next door neighbors' names, how do you get a hold of them, just we tried to make it as comprehensive as possible so that you could have it just all in one place.
Yeah.
How would folks get this?
It is available on our website. There's a spiral bound copy. There's also a digital version that you can access through our website. And we do have a paid membership, and that's the digital version is something that they get as a bonus when they become a family member, if you will.
Yeah. So
Okay.
everything's on our
different ways.
website, parentingagingparents.com.
Yes, wonderful. Oh, I just love it. I actually bought it quite a while ago. And I'm like, oh, I got to go find it this morning. Like,
Well, and we even have, we've even had, sold quite a few of them to the aging parent who wants to use it to fill out all the information and gift
give
it really to their kids, because it really is such a gift to be able to provide all that information and keep track of it, to be able to give your children. And I think that we've had a couple people who've even shared that it made it easier to ask some of the questions of their parents, because it was just sort of matter of fact. Hey, we need to fill out this book. Let's talk about all the information. And it didn't feel as much as that they were prying and trying to be nosy, if that makes sense. It was more just, this is the responsible thing to do, is have all this info.
And like I mentioned earlier, we all have different personalities and different family dynamics, but people can change. And I like to tell people that my dad was an accountant, and he was incredibly not only tight with his money, but private with his money, and wouldn't talk about money at all, other than you need to save money. Watch your pennies, let the dollars take care of themselves. Yeah. But otherwise, he never talked about how much money he made. And it was a secret in my family where if kids were around, we don't talk about it. You don't ask other people what they make. We don't talk about what we make. It's like, okay. Well, when I was in high school, we're out buying a car, and my dad's in with the finance guy and filling out all the forms. The finance guy finally looks at him and says, "And Mr. Barnes, I need to know how much money you make." My dad looks at him and says, "How much do I need to make to buy this car?" I'm just there kind of wide-eyed, and the man gives him a number, and my dad says, "That's how much I make."
Write that down.
Yeah. And I'm like, wow. We go home, it's before cell phones back in the 80s. We go home, and my dad picks up the phone and calls the lady who works for him at the office and says, "Somebody's going to be calling you asking how much money I make. Tell them this." I'm like, what? Anyway, I'm telling you this because things can change. My dad now gives my sister and I basically a comprehensive
quarterly report
where all his money is. And just to prove, he says, "Look, I've got enough to take care of mom. So this is good. We've saved well. And we lost a little money this week in the stock market, but look at this. Here we go." And I'm like, yes, you don't have to go to that extreme, Dad, but it's good to know that you have the money to pay for mom. So my sister and I don't have to worry about it. And like, okay, things are good. But people can change. So don't just because things were a certain way when you were younger, don't expect that it always has to be like that.
That's right. Good point.
I love the resource. I love taking the pressure off. I love the tool nature of it. And I also like the point where you said it's a gift. So maybe, you talk about it, and somebody, maybe not the adult kid, gives it to the folks. Maybe it's the neighbor. Maybe it's the best friend. But I think we have to be clever about this, because we have to prepare for aging, for the potential of stroke and neurologic condition, dementia, whatever the case may be.
What we like to tell people is that most, I know not all, but most parents want to do anything they can to make things better for their kids. I know we do, and that's a gift that we can give to any of our kids, is that we can make their life better if you make sure that we have a will and a power of attorney, that you have all this information about us, that you know where our money is, that you know where our insurance policy is, that you know all these things. And yeah, it sounds kind of burdensome, but it's going to make your life better, because when something happens to us, whatever it may be, you're set. You know how to take care of us. You know the information that you need, and you can know the steps that need to be taken. And so many people don't have that. And they'll have parents who say, "Oh, I'm not going to sign a will because you're just trying to take all my money." It's like, no, trying to make things better for all of us by doing something like that. Same with the power of attorney. Same with any of this, is that it makes life better for everyone, but especially for the kids.
And it's not the fact that we're trying to be nosy.
No.
It's more of a let us be prepared. And the challenge is that there are some families, of course, that maybe have a kid that might take advantage of the parent, and things like that. So I know that there's some families where this can be a little bit harder than others.
Sure.
But it's looking at, in our situation, how do we appeal to our parent, just that we're just trying to help them, and we want to make sure that we're set up for success in being able to do that.
Wonderful. So let's pivot a little bit and talk about the other resources as well as the support part of parenting aging parents.
We have a support group that we run every other Thursday evening, which is great for people that just need a safe place to ask some questions, share some of the things that they've learned, or just sort of listen. And if nothing else, sometimes it can just make you feel good to know that, okay, other people are going through similar things. So I'm not crazy. I am this challenge, whatever, other people are going through that as well. And I think the benefit of the community is the fact that there is that collective wisdom that we can share insights, experiences, ideas, support, empathy, that kind of thing. And then, a lot of what we've also found too is that one of the things that we really noticed as we were starting to do a lot of the interviews is that there are so many resources, services, providers that can help us. But as the adult child, you don't know what they're called. You don't even know what exists or what you would sit down to Google. So it's really trying to look for ways of how can we connect people to those people that are in the industry that might be able to help them and give them the insight and the specific thing that they need help with, where somebody else might not need.
Yeah, because looking for a place to live is a prime example. When my sister and I started looking for memory care places, I had an idea that maybe there would be somebody that could help us, but I figured it would cost hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. Like, okay, here's a company that says they can help us pick the best memory care place for mom, but how much we're going to have to pay them? Who knew that it's free? You go to most of these senior care advisors, and it doesn't cost you anything. The place who signs you up, who gets the lease, they pay them, so they do make money, but you don't have to pay anything. So knowing something like that, I would still want to be involved. I still want to pick where my mom's going to live. But if you tell me ahead of time, don't go there. They have a bad reputation. Don't go there. Their meals are terrible. Whatever it may be.
Or they're just going to
narrow it down to where instead of looking at 4, we only looked at 2. It makes my life easier. And again, it wouldn't have cost a thing. But I had no idea because I've never been through it. So I didn't know. I've never had the experience, and I didn't know who to talk to about it. So because of that, we feel alone, and it's like, oh, I don't know what to do.
And you feel like you have to figure it out on your own.
Yes.
Yeah.
I worked in home health for a huge part of my career, and we didn't have these kind of senior care advisors back when I've been in telepractice for 9 years. So probably 15 years prior to that, I did all home care. And these families just, they struggle to, like you said, know what to call it. Like, I would love to make a list of, here's all the terms, what's a nurse navigator, or
working on that. Actually, we're working on.
Lovely. I figured you probably were.
Yes. A little dictionary. Well, and I think that, and to your point, the fact that until we did an interview about physical, home health care, I didn't realize that, if I felt like I actually talked to my mom's doctor about, I think that she's having, she could use she would benefit from some physical therapy to work on her balance. And the doctor agreed. So they ordered home health care to come in and do physical therapy with her, which I wouldn't have thought that you could even do unless you had fallen and broken a hip or had some surgery or that kind of thing. And I would imagine the same as with speech therapy too, that if there are some issues that you're seeing, okay, mom seems to be having some trouble swallowing all the time. Well, talk to the doctor and see if they can't bring in home health care, and that's covered by Medicare. So again, as the adult child, you've never experienced this yourself, so you don't know that, what might be available to you.
It's so true. So especially when someone has a chronic condition, I'm just going to throw out the diagnosis of Parkinson's because it's a progressive condition. We would try and empower our families to recognize, when is it time to ask the doctor for that new order to get a tune-up. I always called it a tune-up. And it doesn't have to be 6 months of therapy. Sometimes it could just be a few weeks and make all the difference, keeping that person maintained, maybe even making them better, so that we don't have the fall, the aspiration pneumonia from swallowing. Make sure they can communicate and get their needs met and have conversations and keep that connection with their family, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
So I think alerting families what to look for and know that it's possible.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
And also knowing that things change. My dad laughed that when my sister and I approached him about, you really need to move away from, we called it the farm. They lived on 6 acres about an hour outside of Dallas, which was fun, especially for the grandkids to go up there, play on the land and play in the barn and do stuff like that, ride the tractor. But as my mom was getting worse with her Alzheimer's and dad was having to take her out to eat breakfast, take her out to eat lunch, take her out to eat dinner, it was just tough on him. So we said, you need to look at independent living. And again, he was very agreeable. He said, okay, but he admits to this day that as he said, okay, he pictured the nursing home that my grandfather lived his last couple of years of life after his stroke. And it's completely different between independent living and a nursing home, completely different. And he didn't realize until he got there and said, wow, this is great. He calls me a month after the move and says, son, this is the best move we've ever made. And you've got to understand that the times have changed. That what I was used to as a kid, seeing where my grandfather lived, because he went from an apartment to a nursing home, and there was no in between.
There was not.
There are so many steps now. So not only getting your parents used to that, but getting us used to that, because it's not something we may have seen when we were younger. So we have to know how the world has changed and adapt to that.
What about the folks that want to stay in their home but need help coming in? What kind of support is there in your community or resources that are available?
Well, I think some of it is having those frank conversations with your parents to see if they're able to maintain it. We have one company that we did an interview with that they'll come in and do some of those adjustments or do some of those fixes to make the house a little more friendly to somebody who is aging, whether it's railings or things like that. And that can even go in once a month or once a quarter and just check to make sure, okay, are you still able to get around as well? Do we need to consider adding more railings over here, or do we need to change the lighting and those kinds of things? So there are services that will help you kind of maintain your home, because that's one of the biggest challenges, that if you stay in a home, that was one of the reasons why we had really the idea with my mom of moving to independent living. It did end up being her own idea, by the way. That's a long story, but part of that reason was, besides the fact that she was not able to drive anymore. And so she was stuck in her home. And once she wasn't really able to use Uber as much anymore, it was, she was stuck there a lot and there wasn't a lot to do. But one of the other things that I really noticed is that, some of that regular maintenance isn't being done at the home. And so it's kind of, it's aging with you. And if you don't take good care of it, you're diminishing the value of your home. So that's, kind of going down a rabbit trail, but that's, one thing to consider is, if they're going to stay in their home, can they maintain it so that it retains its value? And, if they need more help, well, one, are they open to people bringing in help? Because I've talked to so many people who will say, I just talked to someone this morning who said that her mom and the man that she lives with, that they feel like, oh, we're taking care of each other. Yet when they go see each other, when the daughter goes to see them, she's like, yeah, they're not doing a great job of really, he sort of has physical limitations. She has these limitations. And so they're kind of surviving, but they're not necessarily taking good care of each other, if that makes sense. So is it having those conversations about, if you're going to stay at home, are you open to having somebody come in and help you with some of the maintenance, or, do you need help with some of the activities that you're doing? Are you not eating well because you don't cook anymore? And so you're just eating yogurt for every meal, or that kind of thing.
How much help do you need and what can you afford? Because if you need 24/7 care and you want to stay at home, it can happen, but it's going to cost thousands of dollars,
tens of thousands
a month.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think it's looking at reality of what's the situation? How long can we maintain this? What are the benefits of maintaining it? For my mom, the idea of her staying at home and just being sort of stuck there all the time, I thought that was a terrible idea for her. She loves activity. She loves to play bridge. She loves to exercise. Those kinds of things where staying in her home for her was really not going to help her thrive like it would when she moved to independent living and she can have all of those activities,
Yeah.
people to talk to at her disposal
Yeah.
any time of the day.
Isolation is probably one of the biggest issues. I mean, there's a lot of issues with aging or with any of these neurologic type of diagnoses.
Mhm.
So I love that you have the support group to help kind of combat that isolation, but also giving practical tips and sharing experience. And you guys have such a breadth of resources. And now
Mhm.
that you're reaching people in all 50 states,
Mhm.
your list of resources for people in those states, or knowing the term to Google to get
Yes.
help. I
Yeah.
know the company, I'm pretty sure I know the company you're talking about helping people age in place and maintaining their home.
Mhm.
But they also offer, I forget what they call it, a senior care advisor kind of a thing that can be another set of eyes
Mhm.
in
Mhm.
the house. And whether you're an adult child overseeing the care of your mom who maybe has initial memory issues or has had maybe a mild stroke or
Mhm.
whatever the case may be, we have professionals that we can lean on to really help us know what's going on. And
Mhm.
sometimes our folks won't tell us what they'll tell
Yes.
somebody else.
Yes, yes. And so I think some of it is knowing your parent's personality because there are some that will say, I don't want an outsider coming in. I don't want a stranger coming in and helping me. But then I think there are others who would almost, like you said, would rather have not a stranger, but somebody that's vetted and everything and is
Right.
but they would rather have somebody, an outsider coming in because that way their kid doesn't, their child isn't having to bathe them or whatever it is, so I think that's where the personalities really
Well,
come back into play as far as knowing what's going to appeal to that parent because everyone is a little bit different.
so many times there's a pride factor or a lack of
Mhm.
embarrassment or too much embarrassment, however you want to
Mhm.
look at it.
Mhm.
My dad, it took him 2 years after I started noticing, my sister started noticing, my kids even started noticing that their grandmother was forgetting things and didn't
Mhm.
have the memory she used to have. It took him 2 years before he admitted it. And my dad finally said, yeah, I don't know if you've noticed, but mom's not remembering things. Like, yeah, dad. Yeah,
We got it.
we know that. So it's hard for all of us, no matter how old we are. It's hard for all of us to admit we need help.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I need help. I can't live at home anymore. I need to live in independent living, or I can't live in independent living anymore. I need to live in assisted living. It's hard for
Mhm.
all of us to acknowledge that
Mhm.
sometimes and open ourselves up to the fact that help is needed.
Mhm. Yeah.
Before we wind up today, do you have any takeaway messages that you would give to people that are not yet in your community, whether they join your community, whether it's a membership or just lurking on the Facebook page, like so many of us like to do? Yeah. What tips would you give families?
I think it's starting those conversations and it's starting to think about what are the things I can be doing or we can be doing now that will hopefully make things easier. It's much easier to have a hypothetical conversation with your parents about, what would you like to do if you're not able to live at home anymore? Or, what are the options? What would your desires be? It's easier to have those conversations when it's just sort of like, hey, just brainstorming here, or hey, I just
Mhm.
watched this interview and it was brought up a lot of questions that we've never talked about, maybe we should. So I think it's using opportunities where you can to start having these conversations and start gathering that information, and I mean frankly making sure that we know that legally we've got all that taken care of, I think is so important, because I do think that as we the adult child gets older, we maybe still have young kids at home or have kids very much still involved in the day to day. We have jobs. We are trying to help our parents and do, maybe have a friend or two, in there as well. And so I think it's thinking about the more prepared I am, the better I'm going to be able to continue to balance all of those things when stuff happens. And of course, something like a stroke, you can't predict that. You can't really prepare for that you can't prepare for that because it just happens. But if you have all of the extra stuff taken care of, when something like that happens, you can address the crisis at hand, but you're not having to do all of this other stuff at the same time. And I think that, especially for companies to think about as well, is the better prepared their employees are before something happens, the better they'll be able to do their job and continue the work that they do, even when stuff happens. Maybe you need to take a couple of days off, but you're not taking 3 weeks, 3 months off because I'm having to figure out all of this stuff at once.
Yeah.
And knowing that there are so many services and providers who can help you if you need it.
Yeah. Communication is the key. It's something that I think a lot of us lack, that we don't communicate well enough, whether it's with our spouse, our father, our mother, our siblings, whatever it may be. We have to communicate just so that we know what's going on, how we can get help, how we can help each other. But the other thing that I've really learned from this, and it's mainly because of my mom and what I've gone through with her Alzheimer's getting worse and worse and worse, is that I read something about a year ago that you can't get upset about what's missing.
Mm-hmm.
You can't get all upset about that and get down in the dumps about that. You have to love what's still there. And doesn't matter whether it's Alzheimer's or anything else,
Mm-hmm.
but love what's still there. You still have your parent. You can still enjoy X or Y or Z with them. When I go to visit my mom, I go about once a month to go up to the Dallas area to see both of them, but to go visit my mom in memory care. And when I walk in, the first thing I have to say is, "Hi, Mom, it's me, Mike, your son," which is weird because she's been my only mom. I'm her only son, so she should know me. But I have to say that. And she usually gives me a look like this and says, "I don't recognize you," or "Who are you?" or "What are you doing here?" That type of thing, where it's just not fun, but I have to warm her up. And I have to get her laughing and get her smiling about things, even though she doesn't remember anything to talk about, but I have to bring up things to get her smiling. And I have to love that. And I do. I love every visit I do with her, I make with her. It turns into a good visit because I'm able to get her to smile and I'm able to appreciate that and not walk away upset because she doesn't remember me or anything that's happened over the last 55 years with me. But we just had a good time together. And I have to appreciate that.
That was a great example, and it can apply to stroke just as easily.
You bet.
So many times in the communities that I work with, family and friends and neighbors, they don't come around because they don't know how to talk. They don't know how to bridge that gap of communication.
Yeah.
But I love how you said, and I'm going to go back and pull the quote. Love them for what'd you say? Love them for where they are or what they can do, or
don't worry about what's missing. Love what's still there.
Love what's still there. I think that's awesome. Thank you both so much for coming on. I will link to your Facebook page and to the website. Encourage folks to get your resource so they can be better prepared and give that gift of preparedness. And if we approach it from love, maybe we'll be more successful.
Hope so.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And everybody, thank you for being here. I got to find my right button and we're out.
Thanks for tuning in to the Listen for Life podcast. We hope you feel empowered and supported. Head over to listenforlifepodcast.com to see the show notes with links and information from today's episode. Do you have a topic, a resource to share, or a guest recommendation? Inquiring minds want to know. Let us know in the comments section. Wishing you a fabulous week.